Welcome back to the Road to City Hall. Two bills aimed at creating additional oversight of the police department are currently under consideration by the City Council, and they're getting lots of attention. One bill would create an independent inspector general to oversee the department. The other would allow people to sue the NYPD in state court if they allege profiling based on race, sexual orientation, gender, or even their housing status. My next two guests have very different opinions about the proposed legislation. Brooklyn City Councilman Jumaane Williams is a sponsor of both bills, and Roy Richter is here. He is the president of the Police Captains Endowment Association, and they are opposing both measures. Welcome to both of you. Thank you for coming in. And let's pick it up where we left it off with the mayor yesterday. He and the police commissioner had a fairly angry press conference. Here's just a little piece of it.
What are you going to say at the next eulogy you have to give after these bills are passed, when the family is 100% convinced that had you not passed this bill, that their child would still be alive? I'd like to see if some of the city council people that vote for the bill, and maybe none of them will after listening to us. I hope that's the case.
The legislation would generate so many frivolous lawsuits that its sponsors may well have called it the Full Employment for Plaintiffs' Attorneys Act. So if you are young, you have standing to sue. If you are male, you have standing to sue.
So, Councilman, dead children, too many lawsuits. Have you changed your mind? You going to pull back the bills?
Not quite. What I would say to the mayor, I would hope to see him at more funerals. I go to a lot of young black men who have actually been shot, probably by other young black men. I go to their funerals quite often. I've never seen the mayor there, and I've never seen the commissioner there. So it surprised me that he would say, what would we say? We're the ones actually dealing with it every single day. My guess is he goes back home to his penthouse every night, and many of us are dealing with these issues. And so that we understand firsthand what's happening. And so these bills are narrowly tailored to get at some specific points. Like the profiling bill is narrowly tailored to deal with profiling. Stop, question, and frisk is the most palpable issue, but it doesn't really address that. It allows police officers to stop for reasonable suspicion and search with probable cause, which is what I want. What it does do is says you cannot profile, and something happens if you profile. And there's been a lot of, what's been happening is that the strategy has been, let's throw as much junk as we can out and see what sticks to the bill. And each time we get to talk, we realize that what they're talking about is a totally different bill. And we've actually changed the bill from its original point, where I took information from the PBA, took information from attorneys, information that I thought made sense to make changes, which is why we wanted to have a hearing in the Public Safety Committee, so we can let everybody know the changes that have occurred. We were unable to do that, which is what caused us to do a discharge on these new bills that are written with a scalpel. One of the biggest things—
Well, wait, correct me if I'm wrong. The Public Safety Committee chaired by Councilman Vallone, I knew that he wasn't going to let it out of committee. Are you saying they didn't even have hearings in the committee?
No, he would not have a hearing on the new bills at all, which is where the frustration lied. And some of the biggest things that we did were take out monetary damage so that people can't sue for money. One of the biggest things, we made sure that the language used determinative factor, which is what Peter Vallone wrote into law in 2004 and Mayor signed, so that we can make sure that people can use all full descriptions. That I have to point out, because that's the biggest thing that it's saying. You won't be able to describe criminals. That's not true. You can describe them. You should describe them, and I would insist that you describe them. If it's a young black man, you need to say that over the radio.
Sure. Well, now, Deputy Inspector Richter, you appeared in an ad that's, I guess, sort of visually conveyed what your organization thinks about the bill, in particular the sort of the lawsuit bill, and that's you, as a matter of fact, with a blindfold on, saying, this bill would effectively blindfold officers. Is anything that you just heard from the councilman, does it make you change your opinion about that? I mean, in other words, people can't sue for money, so they would only be suing if they thought there was a problem, right?
Well, people have the ability to sue. It's a private right of action, and they sue for injunctive relief and attorney fees and costs associated to experts, which is money. So what the councilman said is accurate on the first page, insofar as the description being transmitted over the radio, but the problem comes in is when you do have a police officer putting a description of a perpetrator over the radio, and in good faith, because they have a crime victim with them, another officer blocks away, gets that description, stops somebody fitting the description, which is gender-based, which is color, which is based on disability, because those are the common descriptive terms you use. That officer stops somebody, it turns out not to be the right person. That person then has a private right of action against the officer who puts a transmission over the description, as well as the officer that stopped him, as well as the police department. And not only that, but the presumption is that the officer was guilty of bias-based policing, and the officer then has to prove themselves innocent, which is contrary to any other.
Here's what I don't understand. You've been on the job for a long time. Cops get sued all the time. The department gets sued all the time. I mean, realistically, you guys aren't going out and patrolling the streets with an eye toward, you know, am I breaking a traffic law? Is somebody going to sue me? Is this going to happen? Is that going to happen? You guys go out and you do the job. How would this be any different? And in fact, even without this bill, if somebody thought that some outrageous act of racial profiling had taken place, they could, and some people do, in fact, go to court and sue anyway. What's the difference?
Well, there's a difference. Number one, to bring a lawsuit, you're the plaintiff, and it's your obligation and your responsibility to prove your case. The defendant doesn't have to prove themselves innocent. I mean, this is America. The defendant doesn't prove themselves innocent. The plaintiff proves the defendant guilty, right? So this bill is the opposite of that. Secondly, when you have stops, and there's a lot of stops in the city of New York, as the councilman pointed out, and is it too many? Is it not enough? You know, it's a lot of stops. But right now, stops are down dramatically, but you still have the average uniformed police officer is stopping about 2 people a month. That's 2 people a month. That's 2 lawsuits potentially against that officer a month, just based upon the parameters of this bill. That's a lot more than being sued once, twice, 5 times in your career for something that, you know, needs to be proven in a court of law.
Councilman, was this sort of a last resort? We've been talking about this at this table, as a matter of fact, for a number of years now. Was this an effort to sort of move things because you couldn't get them done by some other means? I know you've been talking with the department and trying to get different changes in policy.
We have tried so hard to just get the mayor and the commissioner to acknowledge that there is a problem, and we couldn't even get them to do that. So if you can't even acknowledge a problem, you can't get to a solution. And this has been going on for the entirety of the mayor's administration. And don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. There's been some good police work, but that doesn't mean everything you've tried to do has worked, and it hasn't. I did want to make a correction, because what the deputy inspector said was that it will ban cops from identifying a suspect's age, gender, color, or disability. That's the quote that he used. That's a completely erroneous quote. And in addition, we have made it so that the burden of proof is on the plaintiff. The burden of proof is the person coming in. We've taken out prima facie cases. So you can't even just on the face value say that I have a lawsuit. You have to prove before it'll even move forward that you were using the law correctly. I'm saying we've used this narrowly tailored. We've used a scalpel to carve out profiling so that things like Operation Crew Cut, which I support, would not be something that somebody can sue for under this bill. If they did, it would have been immediately thrown out before it moved anyway.
Well, let me ask you about this larger policy question. I mean, the councilman is saying that this is something that they wanted to do by other means. They wanted to have a discussion. They wanted to maybe move policy by some other means, and they arrived at this when nothing else worked. Do you think that there's a problem when people say that there's too many stops, there might be some profiling going on? Is there any validity to that, do you think?
We've generally, I represent the officers in the rank of captain and above in the police department, and the mayor's policy of stop and frisk is an abrasive term, and it brings to mind a picture, in my mind, that's not the police department that I'm a member of. The back and forth between the council and the mayor and other elected leaders, with the mayor's point of view, is something that we've stood on the sidelines to.
Yeah, I haven't heard you until now.
But the fact that this legislation places an individual officer in harm's way for putting those descriptions over the radio, that's why we're getting involved with this, because it's wrong to put the individual officer in harm's way. To the extent that you have an issue with the police department, you have an issue with policies, that's one thing, and that's what legislation is meant to correct. That's what hearings are meant to correct. I mean, the city council has the ability to call hearings. The public advocate's office has the ability to call hearings. The comptroller has the ability to audit the police department. Those things I haven't seen those things done of an
Do you wish
audit.
the politicians had resolved this differently?
I wish that there would be an ability to actually have some type of an open debate. You know, it's great that we're able to sit here at this table and have a debate, but this is like, talk about the last hour.
But the officer actually is not in harm's way. We wrote this to make sure that they're not. We actually took individual officer out of disparate impact. The only time an officer can be invoked is if they intentionally did something. And even in addition, even if they were found to have done something, nothing happens to them. The only thing that the judge could say is you need to correct the action. So we've made sure that officers are not harm's way. We want to have safer streets. This exact bill is in Illinois, in Rhode Island, Kansas, and Illinois, and Rhode Island. They even have monetary damages. And in Rhode Island, the police chiefs there even support this bill. This bill is narrowly tailored for racial profiling. It does not prevent good police work. I encourage good police work, and I want it to continue. And I'm even hoping that we get more police officers on the street.
That is going to have to be the last word. And you know, it's too bad you didn't have any city council hearings. It sounds like we might have had more of a discussion here than in some cases we had in the council.
And I do disagree with that. The officer is in harm's way. It's the officer has to raise an affirmative defense after they're faced with a lawsuit. That's harm's way.
This could very likely hit the floor of the City Council in one way or another later this week, even as soon as tomorrow. We'll be watching that, and we'll be staying in contact on this very important issue. Thank you both for coming in tonight.
Thank you.
We're going to take a short break now. Still to come, I'll ask the New York One wise guys if Governor Cuomo should call back state lawmakers to pass his women's equality agenda. We're back in a minute.